everyone, and welcome back to Three Sisters Homestead. Today we're going to be going over our fails and successes from the 2022 garden season. First, we're going to be going over our fails.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind would be our beefsteak tomatoes. They, to me, just seemed like they didn't do very good in our climate. They got a lot of blight.
The sun scald on the beefsteaks got pretty bad too. That's where they get sunburn on top and become wrinkly and just don't taste good.
Kind of mushy like a bruise. And then the second one are our red brandywine tomatoes. The same thing. I just don't think that they did very well in our climate. They got a lot of disease and they died off pretty quickly. I don't think they produced as well as some of our other slice of tomatoes.
The pink brandywine did a lot better and produced a lot more, I'd say.
And then number 3, our corn. We kind of had an issue with the pollination. And that was after we had already replanted it 2 or 3 times because birds kept coming in and eating the seed out of the ground. So then once it did germinate, it was kind of later in the season, so it didn't get as big and produce very well.
The birds also love to eat our okra. We planted that later in the season, so it didn't produce as much as it could have, but we still got a lot from it.
Then our cucumbers and melons. If you've seen our garden prep videos where we put up our fencing, we took our cucumbers and melons and planted them along the side of the fence. And on the outside of the fence then, a lot of weeds were coming up. Okay, vineweed and morning glory look a lot alike, except for the shape of the leaf is actually a little different. But this vineweed kept overtaking our cucumbers and our melons, so they got shaded out, and I don't think that we watered them enough either because they just kept getting a lot of sunburn on the leaves and drying out and dying.
The bean bed you guys saw us make in a previous video wasn't getting enough sun. The barns casted too much shade over it. We moved the dirt into another bed we have, just add on to it.
And we're gonna make that that area where that bean bed was, we're actually gonna make that into our sitting area, because when we were out there it seemed like that's kind of we gravitated over there because there's a little tree that casts some shade over there, and we have a box with all of our garden supplies in there, like our extra mulch that we had and our little handheld rakes and shovels, and we'd set our drinks up there and everything. So we're just gonna make that spot into a sitting area since it's so shaded. And then number 7 would be the ground cherries. I know a lot of people like these, but we didn't really care for the flavor. These were just Aunt Molly's ground cherries. They weren't the pineapple ground cherries. So maybe in the future we would try the pineapple ground cherries, but they really upset my stomach. I have a sensitive stomach, so they just didn't sit well with me, and nobody else really liked the taste of them. So we won't be growing those again this year.
Number 8, we planted flower bulbs, but we planted them in the spring. We should have planted them in the fall.
So what happens with the flower bulbs? They need to be overwintered because they have to go through a freeze. That way, when it's spring, they start to grow. I can't remember what the word is for it. But anyway, they need to go through a cold spout before they'll start growing again. So that's why our flower bulbs that we had planted didn't have any success. And then number 9, we planted some sunflowers along our bean trellis, and the ones on one side all completely they weren't getting enough sun and they weren't growing any, so they died. And they also had like this reddish tint to them. I don't know if that was some kind of soil issue, like if there was like a deficiency in the soil or something, but we ended up ripping that half of those beans out, and we ripped out those sunflowers as well. That way the rest of everything over there would get sun, but the ones on the right side did pretty well, but that was after we ripped out most of those sunflowers. We did think of some things that weren't really fails, but they weren't really successes either. They were kind of an in-between thing. The first one that came to mind was the New Girl tomato. It was the first one to produce, but it was also the first one to get sick. It got blight pretty bad, and actually I had her go out and trim off a lot of the blight while I was at work. And I guess it just went over my head not to say, hey, you have to leave some leaves on there. But she got carried away. She got carried away. All I said was, hey, go out there and cut off all the blight off of the plants. I didn't think to say, hey, you have to leave some leaves on there.
I didn't think about it at the time.
So pretty much ended up killing that plant, but it was fine.
But we got the fruit off of it first. So.
Right, we got a lot of tomatoes off of that plant, that one plant. We got so many off of that thing because they were all like, what, 5 or 6 ounces each, and
that's true. Yeah.
we got baskets off of that one plant.
True. The tomatoes period got pretty bad of blight, and the hornworms, they were terrible this year. So that's to be expected, but hopefully this year we will get right on that instead of letting them breed.
Yeah. But I think our biggest issue, I don't know that it was necessarily a fail besides with the cucumbers and the melons. Nobody wants to sit out there for hours and weed. Weed management was a big issue for us. Even with putting down a thick layer of wood mulch, we still had a lot of weeds come up through that. I think that this year we're either going to put twice as thick of a wood mulch, or we're going to try to use some kind of weed barrier. I didn't really want to put down a weed barrier because then that kind of ties you into those set walkways and paths, and then you have to pull it up if you want to make a new bed. But with working full time, and she helps out with our niece and nephew a lot, it's just sitting out there for hours is not manageable for us. And then the watering. So we did water, and we did get a good amount of rain last year, but I don't feel like we watered enough.
For our fifth one that we thought of, our onions did well, but they didn't really do great as we had hoped. And they kept getting stepped on because we had placed them around one of our beds, and our niece and nephew didn't really comprehend that.
Yeah, they didn't really care. They just kept stepping on them.
And then we didn't really have, the onions didn't have enough space to grow because of where we planted them either.
Yeah, and like get bulbed up, she means like get a good bulb size. Yeah. Alright, so that is it for our fails and our not so much of a fail, but not really a success. So on to the things that we think that we did really well with this year, and we want to continue to use these practices this year.
Besides the onions, we did pretty good on our spacing.
Yeah.
And then organization, we spaced everything out, and
it wasn't as crowded as our years prior, because we did have a lot more space because we did expand, and that's part of the prep.
I would say where we planted the stuff, it was better located for all of them.
Yeah, grouped better too.
Okay.
So we put our here, I'll show you guys. That was part of our prep and organization that we're talking about. We planned out where we were going to put everything and how many of each thing we were going to start before we actually started our seeds. But so the way that we laid out the garden is, I think that's what you're trying to say. The way we laid out the garden was better than
I couldn't think of
how we did previously, because we kind of we shoved as much in there as we could, and then as the plants grew, they were just getting all entangled with each other, and we were losing a lot of fruit, just dropping it on the ground because we couldn't see what was ready, get in there to pick it. So a lot better spacing and organization. The harvest amounts, we feel like we got a lot more harvest, and I think that's partially because we did do so much planning and better spacing and organization and all that, because we knew what we wanted in our goals for the year.
Number 4, even though the kids step all over the onions and sometimes pick peppers they shouldn't and be eating them, at times they shouldn't, they love to help out, and it was hard to keep them out of the garden.
It was hard to keep them from just going out there and picking stuff. They were picking tomatoes that were green. Mackenzie was going out there picking peppers and just eating them in the garden, and she'd like take a bite and then throw it. Like she was wasting the food. Like
that, or she'd take a bite and then share it with our dog Bear.
Yeah, that too. But they were just so excited.
Yeah.
To be out there and helping us. And I don't know if it was just because doing something with us, like hanging out with us, or if it was because they're genuinely in love with the garden like we are. Like I don't know which it is. They're too young to really know, you know. But number 5, our fence. We took time to put a fence up around our garden plot. We put up, what's it called? Cattle panels. We put up cattle panels and T-posts, and we used these metal zip ties to put on chicken wire then around the bottom, because hog panels or cattle panels, whichever, they have big holes like this, and we have a lot of rabbits out in our area.
Rabbits, possums, raccoons.
Yep.
Sometimes.
There was that raccoon that kept being in the burn pile that that we saw run out.
Yep.
But I feel like that really kept out the animals, and well, besides the cats, but we let them in. But it held up really well. The only time that it actually fell was by the gate. We used older T-posts that were out in the barn, and they're really good sturdy metal. They're not flimsy at all.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, if you know, you know. They don't make stuff like they used to. But the 3 T-posts that my dad and I went and bought, they were pretty flimsy. Like I'm not the strongest person ever, but I could probably just bend it because those things were not. They were so flimsy. But we couldn't find anything sturdier, and that's what we got. We had a big storm come through.
Jericho.
That's how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Even though it starts with a D?
Yes, it's silent.
Oh, okay.
Well, the storm Jericho came through.
Yeah. We had almost 100-mile-per-hour winds. We don't live that far from the airport. Maybe 10-15 minutes from the airport where our garden's at Mom and Dad's house. And they recorded, I think it was 98-mile-per-hour winds. But so that part with those flimsy T-posts, that part did fall. But we were kind of expecting a lot.
All of it too.
Yeah, all of it too. But the fence overall held up really well through the season. The kids were climbing on it.
Yeah. They're not supposed to.
Yeah, they're not supposed to. We don't let them.
No.
But
if you're out there burning stuff out of burn pile and you turn around, they're gonna be climbing it for a second.
They're fortified.
The trellis also worked good and held up during the storm.
I'm talking about the ones that we built.
Yeah, I was talking about the archway one.
Oh,
I was surprised
all
that
of
thing
it.
held.
Me too, because that one's just on a little piece of rebar that's probably like this, and we not even maybe like this, and we put it in like halfway.
One on each corner. So
what was that? So it was 4 pieces.
Yeah, 4 total.
Yeah.
But they're just held on by one of the metal zip ties too.
Yeah, it stayed really well.
The trellis we also built, it held up great. It didn't blow over. That was just with
2 T-posts.
2 T-posts and then limbs. But we cleaned those up and then just wrapped them with twine and the metal.
Yeah, because we did it with twine first, and then when we had the metal, we went back and put those on.
But that held up way better than my expectations.
Yeah, like we didn't even take it down. We're gonna use it again this year. We had a lot less waste this year because we didn't have a lot of fruit dropping to the ground. Because we were actually able to see everything that was ready to harvest, instead of it all being clumped together, covered up by all that foliage. And we kept our stuff pretty trimmed up. We were able to see when things were actually ready and harvest them. So a lot of stuff didn't get wasted. Mackenzie and 4 picked stuff that wasn't ready, but that was still so much less waste.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say it went to waste because I had fun
because they
playing with
ate it
at least.
Yeah, is it really going to waste if they were eating some of it and learning? Is that really waste them?
As we worked, we cleaned up after ourselves, and even with the kids helping us, if there was trash, putting down more mulch or the tarp paper. I always picked up all the pieces. When the tomato tape broke off the plants, we would clean that up and replace it with the twine.
Yeah, we didn't leave any plastic in the garden. We made sure we picked it all up. Even our tools, we made sure that they were picked up because, you know, a lot of them have wooden handles. If you leave those out in the elements, they will deteriorate quicker. We did, however, our little hand rakes and hand shovels. The kids like to play with those a lot. So
I don't even half of them.
Yeah, I don't even know where they're at. That's probably the only thing I can say that we didn't constantly clean up. And then we did do some outsourcing, local shopping, however you want to word that. We went to a U-Pick patch and picked strawberries. That was kind of late spring, early summer, and we made a couple different things. We made a strawberry jam. And we made a strawberries on top preserve, so like the cut up strawberries and syrup that you would put on like your ice cream or anything like that.
Ice cream, pancakes.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot more syrup to that than there was actually strawberries because the strawberries cooked down quite a bit. Yeah. So then we just canned that syrup in the same time, the same process as the strawberries on top preserve. So then we had the jam, the strawberries on top, and a syrup. Oh, and we fed some to our parents' iguanas too, just as a little treat because they can't have a lot of that kind of stuff, but I did give them a little bit. Apples. We went to an apple U-Pick orchard, but we got a lot of apples from there. I would say we got over 100 pounds. Yeah, over 100 pounds. We made applesauce, we made apple butter, we made pies. Do we still have a pie in the freezer?
2.
We still have 2 pies in the freezer.
Until I get back home.
Dehydrated a bunch of apples. Then we also, at that same place, it was the end of the season, it was after Halloween, they said, hey, there's a lot of pumpkins still out here. If anybody wants them, come get them out of the field. Because they were selling pumpkins at like the checkout area at their tent. But they had so many pumpkins left out in the field. They said, anybody wants them? Come get them.
Fields of pumpkins.
Fields of pumpkins. They said, come get them. Anybody have any livestock that can eat them? Come get them. So our mom's sugar gliders can eat them. And we thought if we could find pie pumpkins, we could make lots of pies. And we still have probably, 20 down there? Because I think we had 30.
Yeah, I'd say about 20.
Yep, we still have about 20 pumpkins down there. They're staying good. They're not rotting or anything. You know, pumpkins
they're rotting slow. A couple have, but there were ones that were blemished already.
Mm-hmm.
And had tiny holes in them, just from laying all over.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, they're holding up.
Yeah. Also, our sister Amanda, her and her husband, they have a lot of chickens. So we have been getting eggs from her. I was like, hey, can I have some eggs? I made a bunch of baking because her kids wanted me to make banana bread and zucchini bread for them because they said mine's better than hers. So they called me and asked me to make it. And so then she gave me some eggs. I gave her some of the baking I did, and I gave her some of the pickles and the spaghetti sauce we made. So that was kind of like a trade situation than shopping local, but again, it's outsourcing.
And then our canning, we think we did great with that. We didn't break any jars.
None.
So,
yep.
That's
and
good.
The year before, we had only broke 1. So, yeah.
The second year with still only one jar. Broke. That's pretty good.
All right, but that is it on our fails and our successes. Can you think of anything else? Anything else?
No.
So we did sit here and write all of these out. So yeah, that's what these are. That's what we've been looking at. That's what we've been reading from. That way we didn't leave anything out, and we could be upfront and honest about the things that we feel like we failed with. And then we'll be doing a separate video of the things that we are going to do for prep for this year, and a discussion about our goals for this coming year. So look forward to our video for our planning for the next season. And that'll be it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.